Welcome to At Home with the League. This is a monthly program that the League of Women Voters, New York City chapter, puts on every month. I am the program committee chair for this New York City chapter. And every month, my committee puts together a program dealing with a political or social issue impacting us. Tonight, we have a very special program. In honor of Women's History Month, we are having three exceptional women all involved in politics. We have New York State Senator Jessica Ramos, and Washington Post political columnist Jennifer Rubin, and Zephyr Teachout, New York political candidate and professor of law at Fordham, amongst other things. But before we go on, I just want to inform you that this Zoom is being taped. So if you do not want to be on tape, please sign off now. But if you like this program and want to see it again, or if you want to let somebody else know that they could watch it, there is going to be a link on our website, on the League website, that can take you to that. And Leslie can tell you a little bit more about that later. But I will put the address to the website down while the program's going on, so you'll know how to get in. Also, I want to let you know that about our program in April, which is also going to be very interesting. We are doing it, we're co-sponsoring this with the Rochester League, which is the first time we've ever done this before. And I think it's going to be great. And I hope in the future we have more programs that include either other leagues or other organizations. The program's going to be on social media and how it is impacting the politics, which is fascinating. Our speaker is going to be a professor at NYU. He recently wrote a book on social media and how it is impacting America, pros and cons. I think it'll be an excellent program that's going to be on March 13th. Next, I am going to introduce you to Leslie Siegel. Leslie is the woman behind the scenes. She is the woman who makes these Zoom programs possible. She is also our co-president, and I'm going to let her tell you a little bit more about the League and some of the upcoming programs. Leslie.
Thank you so much, Joanna. Hi, everyone. It's really great to be here tonight. It's fantastic to have these three wonderful women coming and speaking with us, and it should be a wonderful program, as are all of our At Home with the League programs. So please, as Joanna says, we have this one upcoming in April. I hope you can all make it. Also in April, we have a very exciting event. We have our virtual spring gala, April 20th, 2021. It should be fantastic. First of all, we're going to be honoring three incredible women: Deborah Borda, the president of the New York Philharmonic; Lecia Eve, who is vice president of public policy at Verizon; and Dr. Julia Yassere, who is a director, or is the director of the Dalio Center for Health Equity. So it's going to be amazing, and I hope you can all make it. I will put in the chat the link where you can buy tickets. But in addition to that, we're going to entertain you. We are going to have several virtuosos from the New York Philharmonic who are going to play for us. And we have two Broadway stars, Jen Colella, who was in Come From Away, and Elizabeth Stanley, who was in Jagged Little Pill, and they're going to perform as well. So not only will you have the opportunity to help the League, help New York recover in a just and equitable way, you'll have the opportunity to hear from these three wonderful women, also from our chair, who is our honorary chair, who is Maria Torres Springer, who's a vice president of public policy at the public programs at the Ford Foundation. And our MC will be Liz Cho from WABC TV. So it'll be a fantastic evening. Please join us. The link is in the chat to buy the tickets. I also have some other really great news. we are going to be partnering with WABC TV, Univision 41, Nueva York, WADO-AM, the Hispanic Federation, and the NAACP NYC Conference to co-host mayoral debates. So we're going to be co-hosting one of the mayoral Democratic debates, one of the mayoral Republican leading contender debates in June, and also in October, we will be hosting one of the overall mayoral debates for the leading contenders. So please, we sent out the information on our weekly digest. We'll continue to send it out. We hope you can watch. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Joanna.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I think that sounds really exciting. I can't wait. We're going to begin our program in a moment, but first I want to just give you some logistics. First of all of you people out there probably already know that you're muted, and that's just so that we can eliminate any ambient noise. Also, this way we don't have anybody interrupting our speakers as they go along. But after the presentations, we're going to open it up to question and answers. But again, you'll still be muted. What you can do is write your questions down below under the chat function. If one of the questions is for a particular person, please put that in as well. Leslie will read them out and we will have our panelists respond to that. So with that, I'm ready to introduce our panelists. And I'm going to do this in alphabetical order. So let me first introduce State Senator Jessica Ramos. She is a New York State Senator for the District 13. That includes Queens neighborhoods of Corona, East Elmhurst, Jackson Heights, and part of Astoria and Woodside. She is passionately working for the working class and minority communities. There was a quote recently in a political publication, City and State, that describes her. It says, she is a no-nonsense state senator who is an outspoken, progressive, and adept political operator and won't put up with your bullshit. I think that's very high praise. Good. Now, the next person is Jennifer Rubin, who has joined us from Washington, D.C. She writes opinions for the Washington Post covering politics and policy, foreign and domestic, and she provides insights into the conservative movement, the Republican and Democratic parties, and threats to Western democracies. She does wonderful columns. I'm sure many of you already read them. I was pleased just a couple of weeks ago, there was something on Dr. Seuss and the cancel culture, which I thought was very astute. And these last couple of days, you've been concentrating on the Georgia elections, if I'm right, which also is pretty insightful and will be very interesting to see what turns out there. Ms. Rubin is a contributor to MSNBC, but prior to her career in journalism, Rubin practiced labor law for 2 decades.
Yay!
That is just amazing. Not finally, but next is Zephyr Teachout, who is an American attorney, author, political candidate, and professor of law at Fordham University. Many of you might remember Ms. Teachout ran for Democratic Party nomination for governor in New York in 2014 against the incumbent Governor Andrew Cuomo. And she received 34% of the primary votes, which was exceptional. And I think, Zephyr, maybe you'll start running again shortly, considering what's going on with our governor now. In addition, she has run for Attorney General in 2018. She lives with her husband and son in New York and has published 2 books, Corruption in America and Break 'em Up. She was one of the attorneys that sued Trump the week after he took office. Good for you. The person who will be overseeing the panelist is our own Carol Nadel Van Duzen. Many of you know Carol. She's been very active in our league for over 5 years, but you might not be aware that before retiring, she was a stage actress and worked on TV as well, and also had her own casting company. So we have a whole group of stars here. I'm really excited about this, and I am, without further ado, let me turn the program over to these powerful and influential women. You have to be unmuted. Somebody has to unmute.
Yes.
There.
I am unmuted. I have to say, Joanna, you stole a lot of my fire here because I was introducing you in terms of a lot of what you had said I had in my introduction, but I'm going to do it anyway because I want to get your reactions, so I'm not going to let it deter me. I have to say how delighted I am to have the opportunity to moderate these amazing, accomplished women who have each in their own way demonstrated the determination and, may I use the word, fortitude needed to be successful in politics. And although Joanna has said some of it, I'm going to get a little bit more because I want your reaction, because these are examples from each of you of how you demonstrated or demonstrate your grit. Okay? Jennifer, you were a labor and employment lawyer in Los Angeles, and then you became a conservative journalist. And on November 2010, you got national headlines because you moved to the Washington Post, and every media was writing about you. And recently, you got a lot of, and I have to put it appropriately, angry comments because you criticized the former president and the Republican Party. How did you feel?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and to be on the same panel as these lovely, accomplished women. So to take a little bit of a step back, I began my writing career as a bit of a lark. I had moved to the Washington, D.C. area. I was a little tired of being a lawyer, and a practicing lawyer at any rate. And we had always loved the D.C. area. I had family here. And I began writing. My first column actually was picked up by the New York Times, by CBS, looking into Mitt Romney's claim that he had been a stalwart conservative all of his life. This now has gone through so many iterations, it's hard to remember that at one point he was taking grief from the party for having moved to the right. He's being slammed, of course, for having backpedaled to the center. And after that, I sort of fell in love with journalism. And frankly, my career as a lawyer was a wonderful preparation for the same skills you need as a lawyer in terms of writing, researching, asking questions, composing an argument, analyzing a complex amount of data and then presenting it in an informative way. So I really have fallen in love with it. Along the way, I myself went through not only a personal journey, but I've made a political journey as well. Just between us chickens here, I was never what they would call a movement conservative. I've been pro-choice my whole life. I have been pro-immigration my whole life, free trade. So I was not exactly welcomed by all factions of the Republican Party. But in 2016, I announced that I was breaking up with the Republican Party because any party that could embrace a racist, a misogynist, someone whose views were antithetical to the rule of law, could not possibly be a party that I wanted to be any part of. And I think since then, I have become the object of scorn and derision on what used to be called the conservative movement. I don't actually think that exists anymore. But I think I have found my voice and I found my place, now joined by many, many former Republicans who now have, I think, taken a step back and see as their mission, as I do mine, not as a partisan, but as a defender of democracy. And that Donald Trump presented a difficult challenge, but not a unique challenge for this country. As many of you are aware, democracies are under assault all over the world in different fashions. And so I think everything has sort of come together to put me in this moment. I will say a little bit of self-promotion. I will have a book out, my first, in September, called Resistance: How Women Saved Democracy from Donald Trump. And it looks at the lives of many women who became candidates, who became organizers, who became donors, who became vice president, and looked at this period of time in which women's voices have been so critical. And I think the resistance, as it's come to be known, has not been properly seen as a mostly female-led and female-driven movement. And the contributions in so many ways of these women is the story that I'm delighted to tell. So that's a very long answer to your question, probably more than one.
No, but it's wonderful. Now, Zephyr, yes, you've done everything. You wrote 3 books on corruption. You are a lawyer. You are a professor at Fordham Law. And yes, you ran for governor of the New York State and did very well, although you didn't win. You also ran for the congressional representative from Columbia County in Congress and didn't win, but the man who did win didn't win again. Just making notes. You ran for Attorney General in New York State, and it was a 3-way race, and you got the New York Times endorsement, but you didn't win. You got the east side of the state, but you didn't win. Question: will you run again, please?
So I'm not planning on running for office, but I do think I'm very proud of my campaigns, and yes. And I the reason to run is not to rack up numbers, but because you cared really deeply about some very serious injustices, suffering, and opportunities for the state to be better. And so I have worked on both as a candidate and on campaigns, and with nonprofits and with organizing groups. And I see those as very much, and as a lawyer, and these are all part of the same piece. And it is not, as some in the press sometimes treat it, it is not a sporting matter. It's about really substantive change in people's lives. The first time I ran, I mean, this is very much of the moment right now. The first time that I ran against Andrew Cuomo, I ran in part because it was very clear that we had serious problems with abuse of power. He had shut down the Moreland Commission. And the reporting of that summer, the extraordinary reporting by Suzanne Craig, among others, who is one of the incredible gem at the New York Times, and has done incredible political and business reporting, uncovered that somebody named Larry Schwartz had gotten involved in blocking subpoenas. There was the Anti-Corruption Commission that was set up, the Moreland Commission. And Andrew Cuomo's close aide, Larry Schwartz, had been interfering in that commission and blocking subpoenas when they got very close to people who were close to the governor. I know this panel isn't about what's happening today, but I got to tell you that the news in the last 2 days has all been about Larry Schwartz, who has no public health background, is living in the governor's mansion with the governor and serving as the vaccine czar of New York, making political calls to gauge local politicians' support for the governor at the same time as he's making calls to find out what local politicians' vaccines needs are. And so I am both proud of my run in 2014 because this is exactly why I ran. That I had very deep substantive differences with Andrew Cuomo, and I still do. But the deep impetus was that something was deeply broken in New York politics. At not just on a substance level, but in terms of process. And this, I think, very much relates to my just what has been happening over the last 2 months, which is that there have been people like Ron Kim who've done an extraordinary job speaking up, but so many of the people who have spoken up against Andrew Cuomo's abusive behavior, self-protective behavior, have been women who have an enormous amount to lose. And I think it's really important to highlight that. This wasn't an answer to your question, but hey, as I said, this is going to be spicy. Let's be real here. This is what we're facing right now.
It's grit. It is.
That it is so important to highlight as we talk about his other abuses, the just gross loss of talent we've had in this state, as extraordinary women have either been directly or indirectly or in the orbit of Albany subject to really a really toxic work environment. And when we're dealing right now with an extraordinary crisis and so much suffering, we need the best talent and the highest quality work. And it is not an accident that sexual harassment and abuse of power come together. These are not accidental alignments. So I'm not going to stop fighting for those things. I'm a huge fan of our Scene in 13 Senator Ramos. And I think it's a very important moment. I'm excited to be here today. I've been with the Buffalo League. Do something with them. They're amazing. But it's a really important moment for a lot of the key priorities for the league. HR 1 at the federal level,
yes.
Really passing sort of fundamental voting reform, and in New York State saying this really has to stop. So I'm delighted to be here and look forward to talking more. Thank you thank you to Joanna and Leslie too for inviting me.
Wonderful. Jessica.
Hey, Carol, what's going on?
Now it's you. I've stood behind you in Albany when we were wanting to, it was budget justice. It's now invest in our New York, but it was the early stages. And I was up in Albany. It was also during HALT. And I stood behind you and you were there. And I was so pleased. You ran against an 8-year incumbent and won the general election and endorsements from Senator Gillibrand, the mayor, and the New York Times. I remember those days, the IDC, yeah. And you chair the Labor Committee, so we have synergy here. And although Joanna did quote something you said,
No, I didn't say that. That's someone's opinion about me.
Well, I'm going to do the same, and it's someone's opinion. Um, you are not, you are known not to be afraid of a fight, okay? And one state senator said, quote, "She is a whirl of energy and powerful messaging. And every time she gets up to speak, Republicans start to moan and groan because they know that she's going to bring that heat."
I have fun debating.
I gather you like that statement.
I do. I mean, it's true. You know, I am very much enjoying my job, despite the difficulties and the struggles that my neighbors are going
Oh,
through.
yes. Oh,
You
yeah.
know, my district is the center of, well, you know, quote unquote, the epicenter of the pandemic. At the peak of the pandemic, we really weren't provided with the medical attention that we needed. And it was by design. You know, 5 hospitals have been closed in Queens in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
Of course, Elmhurst Hospital, where I was born, was completely overwhelmed. And I have an entire neighborhood, East Elmhurst 11369, that doesn't even have one private doctor, where I'm fighting tooth and nail to get a clinic built for the first time, right by LaGuardia Airport, an aging Black community in my district. All to say, I represent the most diverse district in the country. We speak more than 160 languages here, including the largest transgender community in the country, and I'm damn proud to be their neighbor, every single one. And I think I see a lot of what I do really focused around ending poverty and ending the generational cycle of poverty, and really figuring out how to not only right now specifically keep more money in my neighbors' pockets. Right now, I'm really fighting to make sure nobody should have to pay taxes on unemployment insurance. If you're already poor, the government shouldn't be taking away your money. Tax the rich; they have money. And you know, and we've really been hurting. I mean, gosh, I wish we had the time. I could comment on everything, especially that Zephyr said. I mean, the report card right now for the governor is not looking good. You know, we have nearly 500,000 people unemployed in New York. We've lost almost 50,000 people. 1.5 million in New York City go hungry every night. 200,000 evictions in New York City right now, and a third of our small businesses have closed their doors and are never coming back. So I have a lot of trouble, as you can imagine, when I'm walking my streets and I see my streets, to then somebody tell me that the governor is doing a good job, or that I shouldn't cancel the governor. I've never voted for the man, and I never would. But and I respect the office, and I respect the democratic process. This is not about canceling the governor. This is about canceling sexual harassment. This is about canceling incompetence. And this is about, you know, raising the bar that Donald Trump lowered so damn low. We as New Yorkers are smart. We're go-getters. Our grit certainly inspires us to organize. And yeah, I am a ball of energy, because that's what's good. And I want everybody to be a ball of energy, because we have a lot of stuff to do and we need to be focused. So that's why we're here. Thanks for having me.
Oh boy, I want to go with it.
This is why staff doesn't let me drink coffee, by the way. Which doesn't help because I'm Colombian. I'm the daughter I'm the granddaughter of a coffee farmer. So, but yeah, I start bouncing off the walls.
We love it. We love it. When I knew I was going to do this, I looked up the definition of politics, because people, when you say politics these days, go, what? I don't know. And I found these 3 definitions. Okay. The art or science of government. The art or science concerned with guiding or influencing government policy. The art or science concerned with winning and holding control over a government. There were words, other synonyms like statesmanlike and civics and corrupt, greedy. It went from one word to something appropriate to real terrible words. Machiavellian, that was the word. So considering these definitions, which one best, and I think I could even answer it, defines why you decided to go into politics? Remember, an art and science.
I would say none of the above.
Okay, that's fair.
Politics is the public expression of our moral sensibility. That's what politics is for me. It is how we relate in a democracy to one another, how we express our values. And I think Zephyr mentioned this in passing, that too often politics has now become a game, a science or sport of process, of cleverness, of getting elected, of holding power for the sake of holding power.
Mm-hmm.
And it cannot be that, and it should not be that. And I will be candid that the media to some extent contributes to this by often treating issues that should be moral issues as process stories. So you get the press, for example, observing how clever that Mitch McConnell is, because he's been able to jam through certain judges, that has a stranglehold on the Senate. This is not an amusement. This is not a game. This is a question of preserving our functional, multi-ethnic, multiracial, boisterous democracy. And to elevate people who thwart that as clever or sophisticated, I think does a disservice to politics as I see it. And I think what we've seen over the last year, if we didn't see it before, was how critical government is to our lives and how critical character is to the people who inhabit those offices. That anyone who says they're all crooks, they're all the same, or anyone who says that it doesn't matter whether you have a Democrat or Republican, they really, if they didn't believe it before, I would hope that they would have changed their mind in this last year, when we have seen how critical it is to express our deepest held moral values, to care for the sick, to care for the most vulnerable. If I ever hear a Republican say that he or she is pro-life again, I think I will throw up, because what we've seen is a contrast in, I think, ethical standards. Do you care about human life? Do you care about your neighbor or people who don't look like you, don't talk like you, don't have the same views, or don't you? And I think it has been a remarkable teachable moment, and I hope a hinge point in history. If you haven't read it already, I can't recommend strongly enough Bob Putnam's last book. He was the guy who wrote Bowling Alone, which is called Upswing. And it's the discussion of how we move from a very I-centered society, polarized, fractious, really unequal society, to one in which the common good becomes a goal and a value. And it's not just happening now. It happened in the transition from the Gilded Age to the 1920s and 30s, the great progressive era. So I would hope that our politics, our discussion of politics, becomes something so much more deep, so much more important to everyday lives. And we see these are matters of life and death. It's a matter of whether we want to have a decent society or not. And I think those of us who have always seen politics as a moral expression, whether it's human rights internationally or whether it's non-discrimination, or whether it's a participatory democracy, I think have felt this very strongly, and I would hope the rest of the country does as well, and that we can marshal the clever people, we can marshal the advocates, the partisans, for something greater than simply politics, but for a communal sense of our well-being as a country, and our moral sense that we are part of a inclusive, multiracial, multi-faith-based society. So that's probably a lot more than you wanted to hear from that answer, but it's something I feel very deeply about, and more so I think after this horrible, horrible year that we've all experienced.
Does anyone have anything to add to that, or? Yes.
Yeah, sure. You know, to me, politics is the art of loving people and figuring out how that collective love is manifested in policy. You know, part of the reason why I am always so full of energy and want to show everyone enthusiasm about the issues is because I want them to be engaged. I want them to find it cool. I want them to find it exciting. I want them to not just dream about rich someday and having, you know, a good life once they become rich, but actually you deserve a great life when you're poor too, you know, and validating that humanity and the autonomy of every single person. This is all to say that I hate party politics. I hate the fact that we only have 2 political parties. To me, it divides everybody in half. Not equally, obviously, but this is the reason why even sports leagues have different teams, right? It's much more easier, and we've seen it in other countries, to find a consensus where we have a structure that is conducive to finding consensus, that is conducive to finding our common ground. I really, you know, I'm not a member of DSA. I try not to partake too much in sort of the party-ish discussions, largely because I'm much more interested in getting everybody on board with championing working class issues. No, I don't care what your party registration is, and this is what I'll talk to a Republican. I'll go upstate and I'll walk into a Republican colleague's district and be surrounded by conservative farmers, and I will tell them and we will walk out in agreement at least on a few things, right? And I did this with the Farm Worker Fair Labor Practices Act 2 years ago. We have to be willing to do those deep dives, to have those difficult conversations. You know, and really, I think use this to figure out, I mean, it's the only mechanism we have to figure out how we can really achieve happiness. But I mean, the problem to me, and I say this as the daughter of Colombian immigrants, is that the rat race is killing us. Right? I mean, we can talk about, you know, all sorts of different issues, but at the end of the day, everybody just wants to be happy and you know, not go without anything. Everything else is extra. So why is it that we can't focus as a collective on making sure that people have the 5 basic things: shelter, clothing, food, guaranteed health care, and guaranteed higher education? Every single human being deserves those 5 things to survive. Period. No matter what party you're from. And this shouldn't be debated. This shouldn't be debated. From then on, we can talk about merit. We can talk about, you know, who's harder working than anybody else. But to me, politics is about love, and politics is about humans. That's it.
I'm so glad you brought up love. No, it's so important. It's not just not fear and not corruption, but active love. I got involved working on political campaigns after being a death penalty lawyer in North Carolina. And I had just tell you one story, but it was early on in my career and had a big impact. I had a client who I was doing post-conviction work. So he's already on death row, and we're looking over the trial lawyer's work, and the trial lawyer had done a total of 8 hours of investigation into the facts of what happened there. This is somebody who not even his own lawyer had given more than a day's worth of work to care for and to love. And to Jen's point, you don't call that prosecutor who won that death penalty conviction, and you should not call them smart or savvy. They are using the power of the state to kill somebody. There's nothing savvy about wielding power in a grotesque way. So through line for me has been gross abuses of power. And right now, I mean, a lot of my focus has been on Amazon. And as I argued in my most recent book, like if you want to look at the political pages, look at the business pages of the paper, because when you see Amazon and Whole Foods merging and collecting data in a way and gaining power over warehouse workers, not just, and there's recent evidence that shows this, not just over their own warehouse workers, but depressing wages and treatment at other warehouses because they are so powerful that they are basically sitting atop society. So Carol, you asked about like what politics is. The old, Greek understanding of politics is the affairs of the city done in a decentralized way where everybody actually has a voice in a serious way, not just a technical right to vote, but actually access to the polls, not just a technical right to a minimum wage, which is absolutely critical, and Fight for 15 was absolutely critical, but actually the power to negotiate, the power to be in a union, to negotiate for dignity and decent treatment. So to me, like we are in a both exciting moment because there's like, we have Senator Ramos, we have people who are, even 8 years ago, politics was kind of like for the Ken dolls. And politics is now like a place of love and imagination and creativity and mistake making and humanity. And I mean, that's what I love about being involved either as a candidate or working on campaigns, is like the extraordinary, beautiful love and weirdness that comes along with it. That's really exciting on the one hand. On the other hand, we have massive centralization of corporate power right now. So, and we have to, I think it's like HR1 voting rights and taking on, the Amazons are very connected and very connected to race. Both are very connected to race, money in politics, voting rights, and power in the workplace. And power because of capital organizing.
Yeah, we have a lot of work. We have a lot of work. Tell me, what got you into politics? What did you have mentors? Did you have role models? How did you get here? Into this? I know how you got here, but how did you decide to get into it? Was there someone? Anyone?
Started.
Whoops. You're muted.
The first campaign I worked on, I did not have mentors, and it was a pretty toxic workplace. And I needed those mentors. I'll be honest. It makes a huge amount of difference. Like, what do you do when you are being repeatedly screamed at and selectively? I mean, elevated and then crushed. When I got involved in, when I ran, the reason I ran for governor is somebody basically did the version of a DM, direct message. It was through Google Chat saying, "Who do you think should run for governor?" And I said, "I don't know." And he said, "What about you?" And I said, "No." During that campaign and subsequent campaigns, I've had a broad scope of friends, but a few people who have been absolutely essential. And one of the most important pieces of advice I got before running for governor, but it's been great for life, is a dear friend of mine said, go find somebody you really trust, take them out for a drink, and tell them all the worst things that somebody could say about you, true or false. Sorry about the sound in the background. And then like imagine that all those things are out on the front page of the paper and see how you feel. And it's sort of kind of great therapy, like, okay, so just, but I mean, the serious point is that for me, of all the pieces of advice, this idea of saying, okay, people are going to throw all kinds of things at you, especially as a woman.
Yeah.
I was single at the time. I was dating, like, what are they going to, what kinds of things are going to be thrown at me? And basically coming to terms, not with them trying to avoid that, but that is a fact. And it's okay. And there was this moment, I saw this extraordinary documentary called, The Hand That Feeds You. It's a documentary about undocumented workers organizing at a fast food restaurant for a union. And I saw this in the spring of 2014 when I was deciding whether or not to run. And it just totally made it clear that I had so little to lose. That these organizers were facing deportation and organizing for themselves and for their community and for the dignity of everybody who worked there. And it's like, I have a job. I'm a law professor. I'm very lucky in that way. But those sort of pieces of advice, I think, really helped. Is just sort of facing what could happen and being able to live with it. And guess what? I've lost 3 political campaigns and I feel great.
To pick up on what Zephyr said, there is a special satisfaction in being hated by the right people and being pilloried because you have taken a stance that you think is grounded in just basic decency and morality. And I noted that you're going to have a session for the League on social media. There is not a woman in politics or in the media, and if you want to be a woman of color or a Jewish woman, it's even worse, who is not constantly harassed, abused, threatened. And I mean daily threatened. And it is epidemic. You have to begin to separate yourself from all of that noise and from people who don't necessarily threaten, but they bully or they respond, and to be able to take some satisfaction in weathering the storm, in reasserting your position. And by the way, anyone on Fox or otherwise who attacks me, I come back with another piece the next day, because there is only one way to put down a bully, and that is to punch him in the mouth again. And although we've had such tremendous progress, I will have a piece out tomorrow on this, on Kristen Clark, who is a nominee for the Civil Rights Division, who is being smeared in the right-wing media for supposedly being an anti-Semite, although every Jewish organization and her Jewish compatriots, when she was 19 years old, which is what this is all about, vouch for her. You still have that bullying in which women cannot play by the same rules. She can't do that. She can't respond. So that's why there are people like me. And that's why there are people like Zephyr and like Jessica, that women have to be able to call something what it is. It's not about someone's tweets. It's about a woman of color being in power or a woman of color being outspoken. Mm-hmm. And we have to be able to call it what it is and to push back with fights that are fact-based and that are, I think, rooted in a simple sense of justice. And I think if there's anything that I've learned over the last couple of years, pandemic, the recession, writing this book, is that there are heroic women out there who do this work, who get knocked down and get back up, who have paid a huge personal price. And if they can do it, the least we can do in our comfortable middle-class lives is stick up for them and stick up for other women and other groups other people who are assailed. So I think in all of that, I think the heroes that I see are the people who maintain their dignity and fight on and weather the storm. And those people deserve our praise and our help. We cannot be passive in the face of these sorts of attacks. When someone like the exquisite Vanita Gupta, who was never given a vote when she was nominated for the head of the Civil Rights Division, who is now pilloried by the Republicans, who accuse her of having somehow cajoled, blackmailed, threatened police groups into supporting her. That's how crazy this is. Yeah. That's when we have to step up and say no more. Yeah. No. And that's what I think a lot of what I do on a daily basis is there for. No, enough. We're not going to let that go.
You know, we could go on like forever. And the energies that you have is inspiring. I know that there are people out there that want to ask questions, and I want to give them a chance. So I just want to thank you for me, for your candid comments, and for inspiring. I mean, I want to go out there. Well, I go out there, but I mean, I want to go out there and really get going. And I'm going to turn it over to Leslie, who will give the Q&A of the people that are probably sitting there going. Leslie, take me away.
Thank you so much.
Take me away.
Thank you so much, Carol. All right, I will do that. No, we would never take you away, Carol. But thank you very much, and thank you to all of you for coming and sharing your thoughts with us tonight. We definitely have questions in the chat. So I'm actually going to start off with a question that's near and dear to the League's entire mission, our entire history, which is about voting. We've been tireless advocates for the expansion of the franchise since our founding, for educating voters on how to use this right and privilege. But one of the things that's really interesting to me is, as much as we hear that New York is the progressive capital of the United States, we have one of the worst voting turnout rates. I think in the last presidential election, we moved from the bottom 10 to the 11th worst turnout. What are your thoughts on why we have such a poor voting turnout, and what we should be, I mean, we have thoughts obviously, but what we should be doing to, fix that?
People have lost the public trust, have not seen good government really in action. And, I'm sure Zephyr can elaborate this on a lot more. I mean, she wrote 3 whole books, but the reality is that people's experience with government is not a positive one. And if they're immigrants, worse so. I say that as the state senator. I mean, at one point, I don't know if this still holds true, but we used to be the district in the entire state with the lowest voter turnout. And folks just weren't interested, weren't engaged, didn't care, because at the end of the day, they felt that there wasn't any meaningful change happening for them. There were no improvements for them. That has largely changed given the Trump experience. A lot of people woke up and started to pick up the paper and actually read it, not to swat flies, and and watch the news with a much more critical eye and ear, and have started calling I think offices a lot more to engage their representatives. And I think that that's very important, because We want, or at least I say this as an elected official, I'm constantly in the pursuit of convincing folks that good government is possible and that we as a collective need to be fighting for these better reforms, whether it's taking dark money out of politics, right? Giving state elected officials or state candidates, I should say, the ability to run publicly financed campaigns. And that's just a starting point for everybody. But ultimately, I think, you know, and we did a lot of this in the legislature in partnership with the League, whether it was early voting, absentee ballot access, automatic voter registration, you know, all of these measures, which were some of the first to pass in that state Senate session in 2019, after we finally had a real Democratic majority, was really life-changing. And we've seen many more people start to come out in New York, but it really does take proving to people that we can function. This is why I try to do my best and be out there and be enthusiastic and talk to everyone. I want everybody to know and walk away from any interaction with me knowing how much I love them, even though I may have just met them, right? And I want them to know that I'm going to be fighting for them. And it's been very hard given the dysfunction and the historic corruption of Albany, but that's quickly changing because we are electing more women, because more women of color have been elected in the legislature. And, you know, Zephyr and Cynthia and so many opened so many doors to us. I didn't get a chance to answer the last question, so I'm gonna fold it in a little bit. No, it's okay. I'll tell you, as one of the few people of color on this entire call, you know, it is hard being a woman of color. And it's not enough like when a white woman tells me that it's hard to be a woman of color, let me tell you, I often felt like I had to put a song and dance on to convince white people that I was capable of doing this job, that I am qualified, that I love my folks, that I know my shit, and that I'm gonna go out there and give my best for my folks. And you know, it's a constant it's a constant battle, right, that I have. I mean, people anglicize my last name all the time, right? People you know, might denigrate me, or I often will give a speech in Spanish because I'm perfectly bilingual, and they'll you know, say, well, why are you speaking Spanish? It's like, well, this is America. We didn't cross the border crossed us, you know. And we in kind of leading with my brownness, it makes people uncomfortable sometimes. Yes, I am louder. Yes, I dress a little tighter. Yes, you know, I you know, I'm a little spicier than a lot of people might like, but this is our neighborhood and this is who we are. And I'm not going to downplay myself for absolutely anybody. You know, we're going to lead with our values and with our culture. And so it's really incredible, this entire process of one blue wave after another, and even the new freshman class in the state Senate has been tremendous in ensuring that we are championing a much more equitable income tax bracket in New York State, that we are thinking about much more equity in criminal justice reform, in how we treat our immigrants in New York State when the federal government has denigrated them so much, yet somehow we trust people to help us raise our kids, to clean our houses, to do some of the most delicate and personal and private work in our lives, but somehow we don't want to acknowledge their humanity. Anyway, I'm gonna get off my soapbox, but there's a lot to say there. And really, I think the more that people see themselves in government, and the more we make it to government to question why this certain system is so damn racist, why such a narrative is so classist, why it is that you know, we're not thinking outside the box. It's like every time a colleague tells me, well, this is the way it's always been done. It's never an acceptable answer. We're here to change things. We're here to make things better.
Thank you.
Can I just say that Jessica's group coming into the Senate and the Assembly was the beginning of a transformation in New York politics. And we're not done, but it really, really has changed things. The voting laws have gotten better. We need a second round to get same-day voting, but it's passed through the legislature. And the energy has totally changed. And we saw this in 2020. We have always been at the bottom, New York, and we're moving up a little bit in voter turnout. Yes, and as a, woman in politics, I thought I would share what's going on here. Legos.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm going to say what an elected official is never supposed to say, and I realize this is being recorded and will be amplified. But I think that many of us realize that the worst that can happen is that we lose our jobs. Right. Someone replaces us. And as far as I'm concerned, I have nothing to lose but the shackles that keep my people oppressed. Yeah. And I will lose my job over that. I don't care. I care about everything so much that I don't care about that. And somebody will follow me someday. I'm a firm believer in term limits. I'm not going to be here forever. And I have a ton of talented neighbors coming right behind me. So brace yourselves, because change is coming to New York, one election at a time. I'm thankful to all of you for helping us with all of these measures, because we are increasing turnout in New York. Yes. And the sky's the limit. We're not going to stop until every damn New Yorker votes.
Yes. Excellent. Thank you. And actually, let's play along on that a little bit, take that thread, and you pick up on something that you said earlier around how politics is the expression of love and how it's really emphasis on service to the public. One of the things that we see historically is that the younger people don't always turn out at great rates to vote. And yet, one of the things that amazed me last year was how politically savvy Gen Z was, right? In terms of, some of the things that the Zoomers and the K-pop stans were doing to influence. And so there's a lot of interest out there that isn't getting turned into action at the ballot box, but also isn't necessarily helping them understand how they can hold their representatives accountable. What are your thoughts on how we can actually get that message passed on to the younger generation?
I guess just briefly, I know I was just speaking, but I just would start in a different place. Like, if we want people in New York to be more engaged in politics, we've gone a long way, but we still don't have a really functioning legislative bodies with the amount of power that committee chairs should have, the amount of transparency that the public should have, much more decentralized power within the State House. And I'm talking to a League of Women Voters crew, so maybe you know what I'm talking about. It's like we still have a few people in a room. That is really changing this year. But to get more engagement, you need to actually know how your local lawmaker voted, which is something that New York's system doesn't allow. So you can't hold people accountable if you don't have mechanisms of accountability. So I don't want to start by saying, how can we shake them? It's like, okay, so looking at this crew here, what are the reforms that we in New York can be pushing for and supporting in terms of power systems, decreasing the power of the governor? I mean, New York's had a bad run with scandals with governors. Like, we haven't had a governor leave without disgrace for a long time.
Not until we elect a woman.
Yes, but we should also not give centralized. I'm all about it. I'm all about it, Senator. Give me a call afterwards. No. I don't know. I haven't gotten a chance to see her speak in so long because we've been living in pandemic land. So I'm just like full of 13 power. But I'm serious. Is that I guess it's like when I hear. I just think that for a group like the LWV, it's focusing on power structure changes and supporting those power structure changes. I think that's really important. And that's, so.
I would also point out that in many, many state capitals, there is not a single functioning newspaper. There's a reason why the Washington Post has "Democracy Dies in Darkness." Unfortunately, it dies in Albany and in Sacramento and in lots of other places, because although it's supposed to be the government that is closest to the people in state and local government, it suffers from a undercoverage by the media. And I say that as somebody who works for the Washington Post, which doesn't do a particularly great job, frankly, I'll say it here, of covering the local DC, because everyone is so fixated on national politics. So you have to support and pay for media that is going to hold people responsible. And I think the other thing is that it really is up to the people who just got elected to show them that it does matter. The reason we had record turnout in 2020 was because a lot of people finally figured out, oh gosh, it matters who the president of the United States is. It matters who the majority leader of the Senate is. This is not some abstract thing. So the importance of delivering, the importance that within 50 days, the administration is able to present a transformative piece of legislation that is going to help the poor and the working class and the middle class, rather than recommit to some trickle down sort of stuff, is incredibly important. Why are they going out to explain this? Vice President Kamala Harris said it yesterday perfectly. It's not selling it. We've already sold it and they've already bought it. It's about giving them the instructions on the box, about telling them what they can do, how they can access what government has, how they can hold their people responsible if they're not getting what they're supposed to be getting. So everything has to be a display that democracy can be functional. Democracy can deliver for people who it says it's going to deliver for, and they are going to continue to have a voice. So it's regrettable, but it's also highly predictable that we have some of the lowest voting records or rates in the world. And the other thing is voter suppression is real. Just before we came on, I was having a fit over a column in the New York Times. You guys can go look for it yourselves, over a columnist who suggested, what's this all about voter suppression? Not a big deal. Making a mountain out of a molehill? No. The reason people do not vote is because politicians make it harder for them to vote. Politicians make certain groups of people make it harder to vote. Politicians choose the people to vote for them by gerrymandering and by all sorts of other shenanigans. So what the League does is vitally important. You want people to vote in greater numbers. You make it easier to vote, not harder to vote. And it doesn't surprise me in the least that after the biggest turnout in American history, the cleanest election in American history, where we had every Republican in the nation scouring for some evidence of fraud, finding nothing, that we now have these voting security bills that are flooding state legislatures. So you want people to vote, make it easier for people to vote.
I want to add one thing, and that's that politics is a part of every single aspect of our lives, and yet we insist that people have to come to us to participate in politics. Politics should be everywhere people go, in sports, on the subway, at the restaurant, everywhere. I want to see politics everywhere. And to me, it's really about getting out of that comfort zone, meeting people where they are, talking about politics in ways that are not just utilizing the buzzwords of the day. We get stuck, and especially as those of us who identify as progressives, we love these buzzwords, and there's this like speak and sort of a jargon that we have that really is inaccessible to many, or many just push it away because it sounds like what it is, a bunch of jargon. I'll tell you, you know, I'm turning 36 this year. I'm the single mother of 2. I walk, you know, I'm born and raised, as I mentioned, here in the district. I walk my streets every day, and I still do it in Air Jordans. And it lends itself to different conversations with the people I grew up with, who never cared, you know, didn't perhaps prioritize their academic life the way they should have, but certain have seen the system fail them in a myriad of ways. But it allows me to seem just as accessible and approachable as I have always been to my peers. And they'll stop me and they might say, cool sneakers, cool kicks. But I'll take advantage of that opportunity to say, oh yeah, and guess what? Could you believe I had to pay sales tax on this, but billionaires don't have to pay a sales tax on their private planes or their yachts? And they're like, what? And I'm like, yep, isn't that crazy? You learn, we have to meet people where they are. And I say this particularly, you know, we talk about the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Daily News, the New York Post, you know, the most popular media in New York is not any of those papers singularly or collectively. It is community and ethnic media. And I say this, I had the honor of being the city's first director of community and ethnic media. By far, there is more readership of transnational news in the city of New York. And that is where people are. But yet we are not there engaging them. The reason why it took a while for many of my more ethnic enclaves in various corners of the district to get into the habit of wearing masks, for example, is because the city wasn't really doing outreach to them and talking to their newspapers, right? We can't stay in this elitist mentality thinking that, oh, because the New York Times covered it, then we did our job. Everybody knows. Nope, nobody knows. Nobody knows. Nobody knows.
I'm going to break in right now. This has been great. I think we're going to have one more question. I mean, you are remarkable, but I don't want to keep you too long. I know Zephyr probably has to feed her son. And I know my husband wants me eventually to come home down and eat, but this has just been exhilarating. So Leslie, is there any one, you know what, actually I'm going to say, yeah, I like this one question, where was it? About how to fight cable news. It was dealing with women who were being harassed. Where it happened to that one?
There was a question that's been asked about what more can be done to insist that people respect women in public life and address the misogyny that we're all addressing.
Yes, yes, there it is. What more can be done? Yes, you got it right.
Well, one thing we could do is elect more women. The next thing we could do would be to revisit the preferential treatment that social media gets in our law, because although they promise to police this, they have all sorts of user, agreements. Never have I ever gotten so much as a response to the many examples I have provided them of online harassment. There's not a woman I think I know or interact with who has ever gotten some satisfaction. So it's taking on the power of social media and those platforms that are so powerful. It's about electing more women and more people of color. And it's about resetting the level of expectations. And it's about saying, just because the other party doesn't care about the dignity of individuals doesn't mean we have to. No, everyone has to. And setting the bar so impossibly low over the last 4 years has done such a horrible injustice to political discussion, to debate, to conversation, that it's really up to all of us. But I would stress taking on social media, where much of this comes from and percolates up. I would also encourage who are the shareholders of Fox? Who are the people on that board who allow anti-vaxxer, anti-women, misogynistic, false narratives? I have never been so much in favor of the plaintiff's bar as I am now. You hold them responsible. We have free speech. We don't have the right to defame and to slander our fellow Americans. So it's use the courts, use the power of the legislatures over social media, and start electing more women.
So this is like a preview for your next conversation about social.
I was going to say, please tune in for that.
And Jen and I are interesting because we like, there's areas where we so deeply disagree, but then there's areas where we're like really close on this. And there are tons of really bad faith Republican arguments right now about what's called Section 230. And it's just so bad faith. They're lying about what they're saying. They're lying about how it's going to help them. It's really hard to actually have an honest conversation about it. But the basics are, besides breaking up Facebook, which we need to do, since 1996, these big tech companies are not basically are a zone of lawlessness, not just in terms of taxation, but in terms of, as Jen said, totally not liable for content that is shared on their site, and they're making monopoly business profits. They're making 30% business models. And that means that when you see really abusive, toxic behavior, they aren't just not doing anything about it, they're making money off it because they make money off of high conflict, toxic material, racist material, misogynistic material. So it's the business model is hurting marginalized people and hurting women. And so taking on Section 230 along with breakups, I think is really, really important. The other thing to say is, and I don't want to pretend I'm too tough on this. I feel like I came across tough. It's still awful. Like when people write really gross things about how I look, I'm tough, but I hate it. And I don't want to pretend it doesn't get to me. It does. So the other thing to do on a human level, and even this conversation is reminding me, is just check in. Like, hey, and just have a chance to tell your friends about the awful things people have been saying about you, and so that you can get it off their chest, because it is important to be able to talk about a kind of level of, you sticks and stones may hurt my bones, but words will never hurt me. But when people have a lot of bad words coming at them, it's nice to take care of each other. So getting more women in office is really essential. And I know you guys know I was going to go here. I know this you before this, but right now, being clear that sexual harassment and retaliation in New York and a toxic workplace is totally unacceptable. That matters not just for all the people in New York who rely on competent government and for the people who've been hurt in the workplace, but it matters for all the 16-year-olds and 25-year-olds and 40-year-olds who are watching what is considered competence and what is considered unacceptable. Thank you so much for having me. This is such a great conversation.
No, thank you. And thank you, Ms. Rubin. And State Senator Ramos, did you want to add anything?
I mean, so much has been said. It really, we talk a lot about how, yes, women being in spaces will reduce, and change and transform. But really, we need to do a better job of raising our sons. And that is on us women as well. I think that we need to do a better job of teaching consent. Consent is a thing. Hi, don't touch people unless you have their consent. Don't grab their face, even if you're at a wedding without their consent. Don't kiss a woman's hand when you're passing by her desk, especially if you're her boss. All of these things really, I think, everything I think goes back to child rearing in many ways, and how we as a village, right? It takes a village, how we as a society collectively come to these agreements on how to best do this. But really at the root of it all, sorry, labor hat on, we need parents to be able to spend more time with their children. They cannot be working 2 and 3 jobs. We need people to be able to work one job that allows them to provide for their family. This is why living wages are so important. This is why everybody should organize and join a union. We need our parents to play a much more active role in our children's lives for morality, to instill principles, to model better behavior, to also provide our kids with better parenting, so the parents' mental health can be better, because our own depression, our own experiences, right? And this is generational trauma, right? Gets passed on. And unfortunately, I mean, that is a toxic behavior that we need to correct, that we need to, and I'm in the process of this myself. Like I mentioned, I'm the mother of 2 boys, and I think about it all the time. My boys are half white, right? My ex-husband is Irish. They have an Irish last name. They will be speaking Spanish. They are going to confront a world, and the world will treat them a certain way. And it is my responsibility to teach them how to treat other people. And it's a responsibility I take very seriously. And I think that as mothers, and I don't even mean your children per se, but I think as mothers, as women, we know that we are at the heart of our society. We're the ones who feed the rest, whether it's with food or information or love, anything. But it's us, it's our compassion, it's those characteristics that make us women, and that allow us to lead in that way that the men caught on to and decided to oppress us from such an early on, era. So, we need more women elected to office, but we need better labor laws.
Thank you so much, Senator Ramos.
Thank you.
Joanna?
You all. I think we're going to wrap it up there. I think that's beautifully stated. And I have to say, this has been remarkable. I have enjoyed every moment of this. I think we should do. You have all been terrific. I really appreciate you all coming on. Just to let you know, if any of you have any particular cause, I guess, that you'd like us to know about, please let us know. I will send you my email address, so if there's ever anything that you feel as though we should be aware of and work on, we would really appreciate it. So anyway, thank you again for a remarkably wonderful meeting, and let's hope we can do this again. Thank you very much.